So is that actually what's happening? He's continuing with the Amache. Is the department aware that he is part of Amache? So that's part one of the question. Part two is, who picks up the environmental liability for Amache? Because it's under the Lintels, the same licenses there. Does that just get added to the bill? Or does Amache have a separate environmental liability?
Okay. That is the most painful thing with you. You are only a man. You are only a man in the office and from another field. But like Mr. Makubela said, you take everything footstools. So we would like that there is no simple. Just give clarity on that. I think. Okay.
Thanks. With regards to Amache and they took the financial liability for those two rights involved, which is West Vets, Monarch, as well as mineral mining services. They took those financial liability under Amache.
So just two things. Is that part of the 300 much as well? No, it's completely separate, but from now on they will take liability for that.
The 380 is solely for Mohale, only. Only for Mohale. The one for 132 and 133 are different financial liability that falls under Amache, under the CEO 80. But under Mohale, the CEO is Mr. Mulman. Whatever is it, also part of the taste. I'm sure that property.
No, I'm more confused. This is your answer. We want, you see this thing, I know the answers can be given. We said, give us in writing all these things here. Even the breakdown, who does this, who doesn't do this. To me, I'm worried that when we get out of here, I'm not sure who owns what, who's not owning what, who's liable for what, who's not liable for what. All of them, Amache or ETB, all of them, tell us that this one is doing this one is doing this one came in this way. That is why I said this report is not, it's like an overview. It assumes, look, most of these members, probably me and Honorable Lorima have got that advantage that would have been there. Most of these members, they don't know, they have not even seen, they'll be seeing that area for the first time. So make it as if you are completely introducing us on this, including the breakdown. Now, as colleagues have said, if it needs be, we are going to help you with civil. Give you blow by blow what you want as an explanation. Then we'll send it to you. And then come back so that the committee can have something completely written in black and white, not as answers. Then if it means be, let's pursue that beyond what we'll be doing tomorrow. So it will be. Okay, can I take CGS? Welcome. Yeah. As now I got the answer I CGS still. Where is it? Where is mine? Electronic card. Oh, I'm safe.
Good afternoon, members.
The last time we was in CGS, we said those are campus people. Now with technology, I can see campus was okay.
That's fine.
Thanks that we are dealing with. I just want to make one point that closing these old holdings itself, while that helps, but when it comes to illegal mining, it's not the only solution, because all
all we do is close the hole in the ground, and they simply come and open the hole next door to what we closed. So it's not the only solution that we need to look at when it comes to closing the holes, but we will present on what we have done in the past couple of years in closing these holes, and most importantly on the current work we've been doing in trying to track where these illegal miners are working, at least where you can see them on surface. So we've got two ladies here in keeping with Women's Month. Dr. Mtodi is a manager of Water and Environmental Unit, so she'll take the first part that will report on the progress when it comes to closing some of these ownerless mines. And then we've got Ms. Gabriel, who will present on the work that we are currently doing in trying to track the surface exposure of these illegal mines. Let me see the presentation.
Good afternoon, Chair. Good afternoon, members. And DG, with your delegation, I would also like to acknowledge SAPS, OVERSIGHT, and other officials and stakeholders. So, if I may stand, please.
We are allowed,
Thank you.
and we understand the risk.
Okay, so my role today is really to give a brief background of how the DMRE project on legacy mines started, and then to give you what the Council for Geoscience has done. And from 2019, Militech took over, particularly for the closing of the holdings. So in their presentation, they mentioned it from there to date. But I'll also give you a little bit about the research that we have done. So this is our disclaimer. But just a bit of background, we talk about the relict and ownerless mines or legacy mines. And what is important for us to note is that these mines are defined as those ones that do not have owners, or where the mining right or leaseholders cannot be traced, and have abandoned the mines and not necessarily maintained or mitigated their legal liability with regards to environmental impacts. Now, this term cannot be found in the NPRDA, but the definition that goes around those mines is under Section 43. So when the project started, it all started when asbestos was banned from being mined in South Africa, and the state was now taking liability for the rehabilitation of these asbestos mines. But for us to fully understand, we then started to do work not only on asbestos mines, but on mines that claimed to not have owners or that were derelict. And we then started a process where we built a database of these mines, and we used information from different sources, some from DMRE, CSIR, and on the SAMRAC database as well, to just get an idea of how many of these DNO mine sites we have. And this is where the number 6,100 comes from. Once that was done, we then formulated a strategy, I think in 2008, on how we are going to manage these derelict and ownerless mines. And although the state had fully taken liability for asbestos, the stand on whether or not to take liability on other commodities wasn't conclusive. And this is because if you took up rehabilitation of the mines of other commodities, you did stand a chance of them sterilizing the resource. But following the audit of the work, we also realized that there are other environmental impacts that are outside just rehabilitation of asbestos mines or closure. So we looked at air quality, particularly where people were complaining about asbestos. Yes, yes. And also spontaneous combustion and contamination of water and environmental resources. So this is where the program was born, which is the Program for the Management of State Liability with respect to derelict and ownerless mines. So the initial purpose of this program was it started, it was to have an inventory, as I had said, but it was primarily to reduce the state liability. And this was going to be done through rehabilitation of the asbestos sites the rehabilitation affects the contingent liability towards the state. And there were also special studies that needed to be done to better understand this liability. But in parallel to that, we still continued to try and understand what would be the cost of rehabilitating other derelict and ownerless mines for commodities such as platinum, coal, and gold, even though the state had not fully taken responsibility for those. But one thing to note is that although this is how the project started, the project then evolved. While we were doing work on asbestos mines and counting these derelict and ownerless mines, we then realized that there are risks, particularly for mine openings. And these pose risks for communities, for livestock, and so on. And we then started to close these mine openings mainly to secure the public and, where applicable, livestock. And then this now brought a discussion of whether or not we need to start thinking about rehabilitation, I mean full rehabilitation, for other commodities besides asbestos. And as we realized that with more information, we get more intel and better solutions, that's when we started integrated research into mine closure. So this is just a flow chart of how we got to our decision-making process of separating these derelict and ownerless mines. And on this slide, you will see that on the whole map just shows where the derelict and ownerless mines plot. And the pie chart highlights those that were listed as high priority, moderate, and low. And this risk ranking was based on multiple factors, which I will discuss later, that may need to be revised. But most of it was risk to communities in addition to these asbestos mine sites. Now, if you look at this plot, you will realize that only 4% of all those yellow mines are asbestos mines. So only 4% are the ones where the state had fully said they will take liability. And the contingent liability, this was as at 2019-2020 financial year, was sitting at 2.5 billion, while the available provision is 0.2 billion. And if you take that in comparison to the total cost of other DNO mines, so these would be the ones excluding asbestos, we're looking at 49 billion, and if you look at it closely, it's almost 4 or 5% of the asbestos would make 4 or 5% of the total cost of the other mines. Another point then to highlight is that 75% of these DNO mines are on private land. So if we are taking up responsibility to say, let's close the mine holdings for the safety of the communities, and back then we had not really started thinking about the activities of illegal mining to this extent. The question was, do we close only those that are on state land, or do we close also those that are on private land? Or is it the responsibility of the landowner to close these dangerous mine holdings that are on their property? Now within mines themselves, mine properties, we have these holdings and we have extracted them and separated them from a mine property, because there can be a mine property that doesn't have a hole and a mine property that has multiple holes. So if you look at this graph, like I said, we are presenting the work we did up to 2018. You will realize that at this time, CGS had closed about 23% of all the mine holdings that were known of in South Africa, and then 27% were closed by other entities, and there were 50% that remained open. I think when we look at that 50%, what is important to remember was that when the project started, the primary focus was not necessarily to be closing the mine openings. This is just a closer look with the numbers within the West Trend to show the priority rankings, and you will see that some of the mines that were actually known to be DNO on a database were then further reclassified as operational, either because there were mining rights that were applied for, or when we went to verify on site, the mine did not qualify to be a DNO mine. But for consistency with the database, we have the number at the 6,100, and we just adjust as information becomes available. So these are just the maps that show where we have closed and where others have closed. And like I said, when Mintech present, they will have updated numbers from 2019 onwards. So I think I can go through these. Now, this is just an image of what mine closure or the closing of the mine openings used to look like. We will get to a site, get an engineering design, seal it, and then mark it to say that this is a dangerous shaft, don't get close to it. But what happened over time is that when the illegal miners saw this, they're like, aha, this is the gate. So what they would really do is they would dig on the side or a few meters away and then enter the mine shaft. So what this has taught us then, which we have shared with Mintech and what they're taking forward, is that we may need to revise, one, the engineering structures we were using for closure, or the engineering designs, and secondly, we need to find a better way to mark for ourselves where the shafts are without being this explicit. So while doing this work, there were a few challenges and we've learned a lot. The first one was that vandalism for materials, so there are people who know that when they see the concrete on top, there's probably reinforcing steel, and they would vandalize for that. I have made reference to reopening by illegal miners and also site security. But we now use a security company when we go to the field on site, and we have not had incidents since then. But more importantly is that closing a hole is not equivalent to rehabilitation. Closing a hole is making sure that people and livestock are safe. But it doesn't address the water contamination, the air quality issues, and so on. And one of the other challenges was that because the project had evolved from what it was intended to do, it is now difficult to measure the progress, and therefore we need to redefine what the risk matrix is, what the intention of the program is, so that when we measure the progress, it can be against desirable around the asbestos mine site. And you can see on the map that there are not so many asbestos mine sites compared to all the others. And then we've also tried to understand what really causes the migration or the movement of these asbestos fibers. Is it a climate issue? Does it vary rainy season to dry season and so on? Because this affects state liability directly. We've also done research on how we can kind of reclaim some of the disused or ownerless mines that cannot be mined further. So for those that have shallow undermining, we have looked at using the mine dumps as material for geopolymers so that we can backfill, especially for shallow undermining, and see if we can stabilize the ground for alternative use. We've also looked at ground stability studies, and this has been very important, particularly if you look at shallow undermining and the stability of infrastructure. And we're also looking at this due to the fluctuation of water levels, so particularly in the West Rand where the mines are starting to close down, whether if they do start to re-water, we will start to have ground movement and how that will affect infrastructure. We're currently doing this work in West Rand and Far West Rand, and yeah, that is work in progress. Some of the other work that I would like to highlight are fluid-induced seismicity. I have spoken about this, and this is going to be particularly important as the mines start to close, that they not only take liability for the environmental impact on the surface, but they also take liability for the ground stability in case the rewatering of the compartments causes any movements. We have looked a little bit at the legal framework. So I think it came up today in the discussions, the transfer of liability during the granting of new rights, the apportionment of DNOs for private and public land. Sometimes we notice a risk, but it's on private land, and it would be nice if it's explicit whether or not we do work on private land. And also I mentioned using the dumps for some of the backfilling material, but there's also some legal issues around the administration of dumps that I think the DMRE is dealing with. We've also assisted in the development of the National Mine Closure Strategy, which aims to, instead of dealing with mines post-closure, to rather plan with the mine for closure to make sure that when the mine does close, there are plans in place that the state is part of, and secondly, that we start to develop economic diversification within the mining towns to avoid the development of ghost towns. And then also we have done a lot of research in developing an illegal mining monitoring tool which uses remote sensing, and I will call Gabby up to tell us a little bit more about the tool and how it can assist not just in the short term but also in the long term. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Sakane. I will be talking about the illegal mining monitoring system. We've been doing some research and development on this tool, and I'll just be explaining how it works. So first of all, is the development of an illegal mining mapper, and it incorporates remote sensing imagery that detects the spatial patterns of the illegal mining activities in selected areas, and also using machine learning or artificial intelligence methods to do that. The end product currently is the proposed conceptual model, which can be taken further into software development, and it uses a combination of very high resolution optical imagery as well as high resolution synthetic aperture radar or SAR imagery. The value in this tool is that you incorporate the data as the machine learning algorithm using the cloud architecture and creating a monitoring system. The keyword here is to provide actionable intelligence and not just providing a map. That is to maybe identify the highest risk zones where these illegal mines operate, as well as potentially looking at maybe the gold loss rate per region or whatever commodity you're interested in looking at. The areas monitored to develop in the development of this project, it was gold mining in East Rand, Moroni, was coal mining in Emaswini, as well as sand mining in Durban. These are just some of the results obtained from this model monitoring systems from 2018 to 2020. You can see on the left in sand mining there has been a decrease in activity. This still has to be verified. There are many other factors that influence the results, such as climate, rainfall, etc. These still have to be verified. Then from the coal mining perspective, which was really interesting for me, was that 2 new areas appeared in 2019, and the expansion of one of the areas could also be seen in 2019. The pattern of illegal mining activities that you can see from remote sensing imagery are usually irregular kind of mining activity. There's no structure in how they work in these areas, but still when it comes to artisanal and small-scale mining, you cannot specifically see if it's an illegal mining operation or an illegal mining operation from remote sensing data. That has to be verified in the field. Defining illegal gold mining, this is from the results from the Moni. This is a drone image showing how they use sluice plants to wash the gold, to extract the gold in these sluice boxes. Typically, a high risk of mercury is always used as well to extract the gold, which is obviously a very impactful, dangerous method towards the people and the environment. The first is, how do we identify what illegal gold mining looks like on the surface? That's something I would like to stress. We cannot see underneath the ground, we can only see what's happening on the surface. Therefore, we look for indicators such as informal structures that pop up, these informal tanks. They use buckets for washing. These panduka stations where rocks are incorporated and crushed in the soil that they've extracted. So we can see signatures such as footpaths that they regularly walk, with soil, debris. That's the sort of things that we can look at. So what's really great about the drone is we can in these areas. Some of the materials confiscated are explosives from these people, the handukkas, that this is from the items that we saw on our field visits. This is in 2020. Right, so the importance of the optical data, remote sensing data. There's a satellite called WorldView 3. It can see every day. It senses every day at 50 centimeters resolution, which is fantastic. But this is a commercial satellite, and I've compared that to freely available Sentinel-2 imagery, which has a 10 by 10 meter spatial resolution on the ground. And it's showing the importance of the commercial data, very high resolution to the freely available data is that in A and C, you can see that the features are clearly visible and correctly classified, where with the coarser resolution data, the classifications are blurry as well as misclassifications occur. Because these two parts features that we're looking at are so small in size. Some of the modified machine learning results over here in the Benoni area, this is close to the Van Rijn Canal. As you can see, from 2016 to 2019 and 2020, there specifically has been an expansion of operations picked up in this specific area. Try to indicate that with the size of the ring on the image. Optical imagery is limited by cloud cover and rainy weather. Therefore, the synthetic aperture radar imagery is great because it can sense during evenings and through clouds. So you will always have temporary consistent imagery that you can look at. Using something called interferometry, we can monitor deformation. So this means that using the detection ability of substance and uplift patterns, we can detect whether a hole is being dug and whether a piling of soil is taking place. And using that as a combination to detect illegal mining activities in certain areas. The data used here is at 20 by 20 meter resolution. So I just have an example of the sinkholes detected at the R21 at Willifont-Fontaine Road. What is great about this is you have a time series of events that happens, and therefore you can detect whether there's subsidence uplift even before the event happens. Demonstrated by the time series here is there was a distinct subsidence event before the sinkhole actually occurred. Therefore, the solution that the illegal mining monitoring system can provide is within the short term you can immediately start monitoring using the synthetic aperture radar data and to get subsidence and uplift patterns every 12 days. From the medium to long term, this whole system can be automated and the addition of the very high resolution imagery can be acquired and upon and improving on the model's accuracy and reliability. Thank you very much.
Chairperson, so there are solutions that are available that we can utilize, but there needs to be a closer cooperation with law enforcement, as Gedi says, to provide actionable intelligence. So this is one of the techniques that we currently do. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Doc. What we do? Don't sleep. Come. I don't know whether there is a gap of how many years. Thank you. That's why you are free today. Remember when they are in charge, there's always a way out. Thank you very much. Who else could do it if it's not you? I've never seen technology being asked from the police. You are overloaded. You want to look after you and still they must look after technology.
Chair, honorable members, colleagues, members from SAPS, all in attendance. We have a detailed presentation that will be given by Clark, who is the manager for the DAO program. I'll just give a highlight. The presentation is very specific in terms of what has been achieved. As CGS indicated, we started the program in 2019. And since then, we have a contract with the department to seal the holes and another contract to rehabilitate asbestos mines. So today I'll just focus on the holes. So we get given an allocation for 3 years following MTF cycle. And what we normally do, we then advertise for tenders and appoint contractors to go seal those holes for 3 years. These holes have been prioritized, jointly with the department. I think there's more, there's a need also to work very closely with SAPS intelligence on the prioritization, because really we're chasing a moving target. So these holes have been prioritized, taking into effect proximity to communities, the risk levels, and so forth and so forth. So the current plan also is to focus on high-risk areas. And what we'll do then, we'll give progress for the first phase, which was 2019-2022. Okay? There, the budget allows us to seal 40 holes per year. And for the 3 years, we've done 125, meaning we've exceeded our target. That's our story. We're sticking to the story. Of course, we can do more. Then what we'll do is that the second phase is starting now until 2025. And in there, the conditions are the same, seal 40 holes per year. We can discuss that. With this as a crisis, we've already allocated, appointed the contractors. We'll be engaging with some. There's a meeting scheduled to see how we can redirect some of these activities to just focus on identified areas. Just to add to CJ's presentation, currently roughly confirmed holdings, we are sitting at roughly 798. But I'm told that that target keeps on increasing as more holdings are confirmed. Okay? So far, we've sealed 135 for a period of 3 years, meaning we have 663. With the current budget, it will take us 17.5 years. So you said we need to be direct. That's, with the current budget, that's what it means. That's how long it will take. Now, actually it's not a lot of, it is a lot of money, but it could range from 550 million, currently if we invest now, to $1 billion if we take longer. That's what we really need. Colleagues mentioned challenges, security as an issue. I must indicate that at the beginning, the first batches we did them alone without the support from SAPS, but we've been working with SAPS. Planning with them, we work with them. Even the current allocation, they are meeting scheduled to work with them to assist us. It's a work in progress. Of course, we can improve. It takes a lot of planning before we initiate the project, surveillance, clearance. So it takes us a long time. So in addition to that, we have our own private security that we utilize to help us preparing and also post, because they immediately come there. So, but also we need the intelligence. The technical intelligence is important, but the people intelligence is quite important. You are really against a moving target. I've personally experienced this. I went to Limpopo with the department. Actually, we were supported by SAP. They came with Nalas, whatever, those big trucks. And also we had our own private security with all sorts of rifles. And the mayors were there, politicians were accosted by the community. Actually, they went straight to the cops, straight. And started accosting whoever was there. So security is a major issue. Actually, when we were there, you could see community on top of the mountains, reorganizing. As we open roads, they'll close them. So we're dealing with a very, very turbulent and colleagues use the word anarchy. There's a lot that needs to be done on the security. Yeah, working on it, but you can of course improve. We will be engaging with our current contractors to redirect efforts to the current situation, but honestly, it's a reactive mode that we don't need to be in. It needs a lot of training, but the resources, in our case, the budgetary constraints is a limiting factor. So Flaco will give an overview of where we started from the East Rand, what we've sealed, where we are in the West Rand, and what we plan to do going forward. Thanks.
My apologies, Chair, we are still trying to...
As those what technicians can do, let me do it like this, yeah? I'm prepared because I do have this. The one who's reading the dedication for SAPS, you have a copy? Can you take my copy? I'll just take the head of it. The one from... no, I'll give you one. You can't use this. Not must certified police station to tell us. Home Affairs, one in continue. Give someone to do the same. Give someone to the police station. We only satisfy one copy. And what happens when I'm trying to power me shift in? How about that? Why this one of test was starting?
Since my Chinamon police association, we are always using target. Why am I police there? They walk
so bad. Must have a few changes to us.
Like trouble police.
I hope that those 17 years is not also including technology. It will take so long to implement the education. We should be concerned.
It's a state entity.
Even the computer have Can you help us? JD, can you, this guy there, stand on the other side? And then this one comes this side. Now continue with you. No, wait, you don't understand. He and you must be that side. The two of you, that side. The presenter must, no, don't run. I'm not saying I'm not. The presenter come in closer to Honorable Jafta with your chair. With your chair. You are used to, don't run away from your computer. You can continue fixing the computer too. Continue to try and fix the presentation. I'm sure you do have the presentation in your laptop. Continue with your laptop. We will look at our own documents and our own laptops. Whichever. If you don't have, if in your laptop, take it next door to Honorable Jafta. So I'm sure you do have it in your laptop, and then you continue. JP and will still be trying to sort out. When it's shown on the screen, we will move. Yes.
Good afternoon, Chair of the committee. Good afternoon, committee members. Good afternoon, DG. DG and CEO of MITEC. Sir, Home Affairs. Let me apologize for the glitch that we had with regards to filming up our presentation. It will disadvantage some of the members that don't have access to that presentation. But in essence, I'm going to take you through the overview of the Holdings program, progress to date, and I will take you through the maps and location of what we've done, and then I will try and bring it home, and we have slides that focus on KRUGERSDORP and the Western area, and then we also talk about future plans for the program and also for the KRUGERSDORP area. Thank you. So as an introduction, MITEC is managing the implementation of the derelict and ownerless mines rehabilitation program, which we are doing in conjunction with and funded by the Department of Mineral Resources and Energy. The program is two major sub-programs, which is the asbestos mine rehabilitation, where the strategy is to eradicate the water and airborne spread of asbestos fibers. And we also have the Holdings closure. Holdings, my colleague has already spoken about it. The term holdings itself doesn't sound, the English doesn't sound right, but essentially it means openings that were done on the ground for mining activities. That includes your formal shafts, your informal shafts, your edits, and any other openings. And the plan there is to permanently seal the derelict shafts and mine openings for the safety of human beings, animals, and cars. The program commenced in MITEC from 2019. In terms of the overview and our progress to date, we are currently focusing on a high-risk, high-priority derelict projects in Gauteng. So the risk ranking, or what we might call high risk, might not be a high risk to someone else, depending on what parameters we're using. The intention was to reduce the risk to community. So sites that we prioritized were ones that are in very close proximity to communities. In the first batches, we were selling shafts in illegal settlements and right next to people's houses where you could find kids playing next to them. And the progress of the program to date in the last 3 years, we have managed to seal 125 holdings at a cost of 82.96 million. That cost excludes security costs. And we have appointed 10 contractors. And these holdings are vary in size from 1 meter wide, if we're talking of informal holdings, to proper shafts that are more than 10 meters wide. So between 2019 and 2022, we have managed to issue 27 batches of the holdings contracts. So typically a batch will have about 20 shafts, which we further break down to classes. Classes of about 3 or 4, depending on location. And we have done 7 of those. And the cost, as I've said, is 89.2. The average cost per batch is about 12 million. Next, I was going to take you through maps. I think this would have been more beneficial if I could have projected it. But in batch 1, we did 21 haulings, and they were mainly in Newport, Crown Mines, Benoni, and Bradford. And then in the second batch, we did 20 haulings, and these were in KRUGERSDORP, Randfontein, Benoni, Bradford, Nigel, and Newport. And then we did batch 3, where we sealed 12 haulings. These were in KRUGERSDORP, City Deep, Crown Mines, and Jamestown. Then in batch 4, we did 18 haulings in KRUGERSDORP, City Deep, and Newport. Batch 5, we did 18 in Benoni, Jamestown, Soweto, and Niger. Batch 6, it was 20 haulings in Magaliesberg and Brakpan. And batch 7, we did 26 haulings, and they were in the Zamimpilo informal settlement in the Langwa area. I also have some pictures of the progress, which unfortunately are not beneficial since I cannot project them. So I'll then move on to focus on KRUGERSDORP and the Western area. As previously presented by the department, we have done 52 haulings in the Western area. Of those 52, 12 are specifically in KRUGERSDORP. And we have also done 39 in the Magalies area, which also falls under Magalies City. And I have a list of all the haulings we have done in the Western area. Then we still have 26 haulings that are, as per report, open in KRUGERSDORP. These sites are still to be technically investigated and stopped for closure. I think what I should also state is that these 26 are the recorded shafts. But from experience, we have realized that when we go out to see the shafts, you'll find that the Zamazamas have already opened more haulings that are close to the existing shafts. Because if there's tape walls and there's an incline shaft and the Zamazamas are knowledgeable of the underground infrastructure, they're able to move 30, 40 meters down and open another shaft that gives them access to the same underground network. I also have a map of these. We have mapped them where these shafts are. In terms of the future plans, the program for this financial year is still continuing, and we had already done our planning and we had issued a tender for 26 haulings under phase 8. The construction for this is expected to be completed by December 2022. Of those that are already issued, 5 of them are in the KRUGERSDORP area. So meaning that the 26 is going to be reduced, the number is going to be reduced. Then the outstanding is going to be investigated and prioritized and included in our yearly plans. I have a list also of these tenders that are under batch 8. Then this program itself has challenges that we're faced with on a daily basis. I will just summarize a few of them. The first one is the issue of security. The holdings are located in illegal mining hotspots, and that in itself means there's risk of life to officials involved in the program. And currently, how we're executing the program, we have a technical security service provider that helps us to do that, also in conjunction with SEPs. We've had a lot of support that we've received from SEPs, and they assist us every time we go and close the shafts. We will not be able to do our jobs without them. But more can still be done in terms of intelligence and to help us with the planners. They know these areas better than us. The second challenge that we have is budget constraints. Okay, thank you. I'll be switching on to the presentation.
Now I can see you're more comfortable.
All right. I'll present the challenges and then I'll take you back to the slides that I was saying. It would have been more beneficial to bring them up. So the other challenges that we have is the budget constraints. The CEO has already touched on that. This slows down the progression of the program and it limits the number of sites we have done. According to the budget we only have a target to do 40 holdings per year. And that means for the next 16, 17 years, we will still be closing shafts. And since it's a moving target, new holdings are being opened. We will be having this problem for a long time. If the budget constraints can be lifted up, we'll be able to do more. Intec has the technical capability and the capacity to do more. We should be able to do 100, 120 shafts in a year. And the other thing is the new holdings. So it means we're chasing a moving target. We record that, like I was saying in previous talk, we say we have 26 shafts. That's what is recorded, that's what's approved. And that's the target that we're chasing. But when we get to the ground, you actually find that that number is actually not 26, maybe it's not 48. So we are always chasing that moving target. And there's also the challenge that when we close the shaft, there's always attempts to reopen it. We've changed our designs. On the first pages, we had one shaft which was reopened at the 8, which is also here in KRUGERSDORP. Then we went back to the drawing board and we changed our design. Now they're struggling to reopen our shaft. But if they think there's too much effort in reopening the shaft, what they do is they just move 15, 20 meters down and dig another one. Then they have access to the same underground. So that makes it a huge challenge. And it goes for post-closure monitoring. Thank you. So let me take you back now to the maps I referred to earlier. These are the shafts that we sealed in batch 1, and they were. Batch 1 was the first one. Here there was not a risk in terms of illegal mining. In this batch, this was the first batch we did. Mainly we focused on the risk to lives. So the shafts were very close to human settlements. And these were in Rudeport, Crown Mines, Benoni, and Blackburn. And then batch 2, we were still also focusing on that. And we closed shafts in KRUGERSDORP, Randfontein, Benoni, Blackburn, Nigel, and Rudeport. And then we moved on to batch 3. Batch 3 now we're starting to get, that's when we started involving SAPs. We're now closing shafts that are active in illegal mining areas, which is your KRUGERSDORP, City Deep, your Crown Mines, and Gemston. And then batch 4, was also KRUGERSDORP, City Deep, and Report. Page 5 was also now in illegal mining hotspots. That was in Benoni, Jamestown, Soweto, and Niger. In page 6, we started to realize that if we're going to be closing shafts all over the place, we will not be more effective, because the focus was now also moving towards illegal mining. So we will then focus in one area and try and close shafts in that whole area. This was in discussions with SAPS, and we closed the GOU batch, which is in Mahalisburg. We closed shafts in that whole area. And then we moved on to batch 7, which is in Langla, it's an informal settlement. We also closed shafts in that whole area, totaling 26. Of those 26, we had about 8 that were new shafts that were not originally in the database. And these are pictures of some of the shafts we closed. Then in terms of the mapping of the shafts in KRUGERSDORP, this is where they are located in. We have these locations and the KML positions of the shafts. Thank you.
I think it's our quick presentation, straight out to the what we continue with the applications. Thanks.
Okay, thank you very much. Dr. Mtuku, for the presentation. Are there any questions of clarity that members would want to ask? I see the hand of Honorable Lorima. Is there any other hand? Honorable Matope, Honorable Malinga, then Honorable Volmara. Honorable, both CGS and
Got questions on one area, and that's IMN, which I think sounds very useful and important. But I just need clarification on the status. Where are you in the program? I mean, is it implemented and usable yet? Is it budgeted for? If it is, where it is usable, what are the plans to share it on a regular basis with the department? The information that you get from it.
okay. Honorable Matope.
Thanks, Chair. I'll stand again. I just have a few questions for the CGS presentation. I think the first one is on slide 7. No, it's on slide 8. We were speaking about status of slide 7. We were speaking about ranked priorities, and then it says there that 22% of the mines were visited, but there was no access. So can you please expand on what that means? And then I think there's a very crucial point that you raised, which I think also is a lot of answers to, but I'll bring it back to you again in terms of why you're not able to make a decision. Where you said that some of the mines, they are on private owned land, and therefore you do not know whether the process of rehabilitation and closure lies with the landowners or with the state. I'm trying to understand why you do not understand why that is the case. And then I think another one that you raised was the issue of that the closure of mines does not necessarily address the issues of rehabilitation, which I think is to a certain extent understandable. But what are the measures that you're putting in place to make sure that as much as you're doing the issue of mining closures, you're also doing the rehabilitation, which is also your responsibility?
And to a certain extent, I think this now goes to both entities. So you see that you will close here, the illegal miners will open there, and sort of feels like a futile exercise, the issue of closure. So what else are you suggesting can be done to make sure that when mines have been closed, they're closed altogether? And I think with that being said, I know that the presentation says 50% of the mines sort of have been closed. I think that's like 8. So what guarantee do we have that the ones that you classified as closed will not be reopened again? As I think of entities are raising the issue that we open, we close here, we cannot open elsewhere. And then I think the second last question, it's more or less to avoid entities. I know there was a time where we were doing the whole thing of water treatment, where we found out that the entities are doing more or less the same work, and there isn't much of collaboration. So I wanted to check whether there is now collaboration in terms of that the work that Wintech is doing is not being done by CGS as well. And you are also not duplicating work that is supposed to be done by other departments, other entities as well. And then the third, the last question is on the issue of, I think all of us are now when you say that if we are going to move in the trajectory that we're moving in right now, and with the current budget that we're moving in right now, we are number one going to only finish this issue of closing mines in about 17 years or so. Secondly, you might find out that by the time you get to that 17 years, the bill is even gone up higher than it is right now. So which therefore means that it is urgent that the issue of closing mines is actually taken into consideration and perhaps there must be a budget allocated. But what I've also realized is that there's a lot of tendering as well, a lot of the work is being given to contractors. And I'm trying to understand whether the entities themselves are considering perhaps going into building their own internal capacity of producing these things, which in most cases it turns out to actually make things cheaper and much more efficient because you don't train the people yourself, they are stationed to look specifically to this issue of mining projects. So if we actually looked at that the department itself must create internal capacity to make sure that there are people, like there's an issue of unemployment in South Africa, where people are sitting there, perhaps with the necessary skills that can be used by the department to make sure that we actually address this issue without actually running this very high bill right now. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairperson. I'm trying to reckon in my brain that how is it that we are sitting with all this and dealing with mines? Because each and every mine, you can't mine without a license unless if I had, was it DDG Makubela or the RM, who said the issues that they were dealing with were post-94. So my question, Chair, would be, are the mines that are the shafts or the holdings that are being closed, mines that came into being before the democratic dispensation, was there no licenses given to the people who were mining there? Because owners are the directors or CEOs of those mines at the time dead or something, because the expenditure that the department or the entities are incurring, it's a lot. And given what Dr. Mtuku has just said, that with the current budget that they have, to close these holdings is going to take them 17 years. The danger is, Chair, Mr. Ndlovu just said, you close here, the illegal miners move 15 to 20 meters away from where you have closed, reopen, because there is a turf wall. So is this not a fruitless exercise? I'd like an explanation on that, Chair, because it's like we are putting money on a pitless pool. Chair, is CGS and Mintech doing the same thing? Because they are both talking about asbestos. Or maybe it's different, they are doing the same thing for different purposes. Because I think Dr. from CGS said she even explained that holding and rehabilitation is different. They are also closing the open shop. They are not rehabilitating. Also, Mintech is doing the same thing. So we are putting the limited resources to both entities to do the same work. Is it logical? The last point, Chair, tender for 26 holdings. Is the 26 that we were talking about earlier, or is it different from what was said from the presentation that we got in the morning from DMRE? Because DMRE said they have closed 52, they are left with 26. Is the 26 that Mr. Ndlovu is talking about different from what we've had, or the remaining of the holdings that are still left to be closed? And the 5 that they are specifically talking about from KRUGERSDORP, is it from the same 26? Because if it's you can't say it's 26 then 5 from KRUGERSDORP, that means it's 31. Or maybe the 26 then is a breakdown from the 26 is 26 from 5 from KRUGERSDORP, then the remainder is from the other areas. Lastly, Chair, on CGS, they said they have a system to track illegal. I think it was no
Get.
floor only.
Get.
Okay.
Get. Oh, when does
Can-
you say capital?
Windows. Okay. Can they, if you see Chairperson, I think if CGS has this system, they can maybe share with Mintech. Because I think the system detects where illegal mining, if I got it correctly, detects where illegal mining is happening. Because I think in the slide where they even showed that there is a decline in sand mining and coal mining, I think you used that system. So it means it can be used. Maybe the department can look into the issue of saying CGS and Mintech. CGS, you come in with your system, and Mintech, they work together. Then from the same budget that CGS, we were pleased that CGS and Mintech, you got more budget this financial. Now you're going to finish it because to me this is it's a waste of money, energy, and or maybe even the same contractors that you are employing, they work with the Zamazamas. Because on TV, they said even subs is working with the Zamazamas. So you don't know who to trust. Maybe the same contractors you are employing, they work with the Zamazamas and say, hey, you guys, Tina is the people who are given this job, when we close it, you can move here. But I'm glad that you say you also do the investigation, because you say maybe the 26 that you're talking about can even climb to 48. So we're going backwards. We're going nowhere slowly. Thank you very much.
Move on.
Chair, thanks, and I welcome the presentations. Let me just pick up from where Honorable Malinga left off. I'll be brief. The 135 closed homes there, is it that number? Does it include the one from CGS, or does it exclude the one from CGS? Is it the same number, or does it include them? That's the one. The other one is on the same technology, also picking up from the previous members. in gathering this intelligence from this technology, to what extent, if it's already being used, to what extent can that information be shared with subs, so that as much as we are doing the closing, but it can also help in preventative measures with regards to the illegal mining. So it's a question of more collaboration, not only in question of going to arrest or going with us there for protection or security purposes, but also in as far as sharing that type of technology, to what extent can that be done. Thanks.
Yeah. Honorable Nkula, there is something useful. We were in the house of the elder. I will tell you what you are doing. What is it called in Xhosa? What continue.
No, man, Chair, just a quick one. Dog, you say it will take 17 years plus to seal all the shafts. And I think it will take more than that. If you close this one, then they open there. It says you've got a bigger problem. So what I want to understand is that if you close the shaft, then they open a new one, who then bears the responsibility financially to deal with that new one that is open? Simple logic.
No, thank you. No, I think there are some other few issues that the department. I think the first issue, the problem of the religion ownerless mines is that it predates the legislation. Initially, you did not have a legislation that compelled mining companies to do rehabilitation. And now, the law unfortunately can't apply retrospectively. When you started to put some stricter regulatory systems, unfortunately, that's why it says derelict and ownerless. It is good because some of those mining companies are already left, and they left the mess that you see when you go. You see, and maybe some you may say they're there, but they've changed now. One, I remember at some point they changed names 8 or 9 times. So to start on the woo from the first one, but surely in terms of the law, even if you go to court, you won't win it. That's why it becomes a liability to the state. Unlike the one we're dealing with here, on a conversion, that when the new legislation come in and they were already in operation, they would have converted. Then when they convert, you can then make that level of liability. I think that is one point. One thing that I wanted to check on the work. Maybe let me start here. If it's going to create a problem for you, DG, you will go and solve it, not here. Why or how? 2018 to 2019, then cut off from CGS to Mintech. What would have been the logic? And what could have been, did that mean, because that's project management may not accept that what would have been allocated? Because if the allocation is only on the basis of a year to year, then what Dr. Mtugu says is possible. You see? Which is why you kept on asking the question. I think since some of us are having asked the question, what will be the total cost of closing down the religion ownerless mine? And I can assure you the 5 billion that you are talking about is nothing. It's just an impossibility. Maybe it's what is allocated to you that can cost that, but we don't have the department. It has never come back to us and say, so that when they update, they update on something that is there. We keep on estimating that the cost could be 40 billion rands and so forth. Please don't do this thing. We can do, I can see even here now, I understand why there's something called fruitless and wasteful expenditure. You eat lunch when you're still carrying breakfast. Now, the way sometimes the state uses public resources shouldn't make us be afraid to say, give us this money that sometimes you return back even unused. You don't have that experience. I'm sure you are the most strategic people to demand more from treasury because you can use an account. So I'm very much interested. Maybe if you want to leave it for tomorrow, for the department to answer that, it would be nice. But I think for me, is this grant from the department conditional? I take it as a grant. You say you take it as being hired, contracted. I take it as a grant. Is it conditional? And if it is conditional, who decides first where to find those holdings, and who decides which one are a priority? Is it the same? Is it the department or is it yourself, especially now military, because I think the ball is with you? Is it something that? Look, I think there has been an issue, and I know this thing is going to be controversial, but bear with me. There's been an issue with regards to, this one doesn't follow its subs. It falls on two departments. Has there been an issue to engage other departments, like correctional service and the SANDF, on programs of this nature? I've seen when there was a problem with water, is it in Western or somewhere, that they've asked for the services of the SANDF to deal with matters of this nature. One man, I don't want to say this thing, but I'm sure he's sitting there at home, once said, why don't you just go and close this thing, whoever is inside? I'm not saying that. But I'm just saying, have you considered the expertise and the skills? Because for me, if we look at this thing of derelict and ownerless mines, it's one of our biggest national security threats. And that may not fall on you directly, but it may fall on also the department, because I think those services may be of good use. I get the point that Honorable Malina, it was a little bit concerning to me. The problem with illegal mining is different types of illegality. Currently, I'm not saying illegality, there's one better than the other. But we are dealing with the violent side of illegal mining. Now, I'm not sure when the CGS would say we are detecting activities of illegal mining. Yes, sand mining is just one of them, chrome and other things. But when it comes to gold, it becomes a completely different chapter. I don't think there's anyone who wants to even the regional manager taking photos flag. It tells you we are not dealing with just an ordinary exercise. Now, I wish to understand, I know we're dealing with illegal mining, but is it the same when it comes to the one that is now keeping us awake even at any given moment? Is it the same, that detection? But also, the point also is being raised. Does that detection continue even when it's now no longer a funded mandate? Because the mandate, I assume, is now resting with, which is the closure, rest with Mintech. beyond what honorable members were raising, can you help us? If you can't, that's okay. I made an example. I said, sometimes we deliver services very well. Deliver water, the tap is there, and it's recorded that there's water in that building. If you want to stand pipe is long dry, it's calculated as a delivered water. Now, in most cases, by experience, you go and seal most of these holdings. I see the other part whether they go and dig somewhere. They dig within your slab where you closed it. Ne? They dig around the slab that you closed and they find the tunnel or whatever you call it. Can we call that a project that has been successful? How many of those? Because as members were saying, you may, by records, it's declared that you have sealed it. I'm not talking about opening from where you close, you seal. How many of those where you sealed, you need to go back because it's like you didn't do anything. Unlike what I'll make an example of, unlike what your race cost, that one is a good example because you close a bigger space that they can't make an end to. Or should we make a consideration that we encourage many of our people? There's only one thing that we have been successful. I was saying to Honorable Masham. You see, building malls, it's one thing that we've done very successfully. Maybe we should make a consideration that part of sealing these areas is to build these structures that just set up a mall so that no one can be able to dig around, digging around the mall. It will take you like a prisoner wants to escape from prison. Have you made consideration of major activity or centers, I'm not just making an example, that can encourage investment that will address the issue in a shorter period than the scary one of millions. But lastly on this one, how much the department is giving you for this project? And an average, how much does it cost to close those holdings? I think that will help us to moving forward. Thank you. You can decide CGS and Mintech. I see the doctor wants to. Hey, what's the CGS? Whoever is the doctor in charge. Okay.
Thank you, Chair. I'll take the questions on the system itself. There were quite a few questions on the systems. So where is the, I think it was Honorable Lorimo asked where the system is at in terms of the progress. So we started this, I think 2 years ago, the system. It was actually born out of a competition that I gave in year 1 to develop this system. And we were at the time doing research on not necessarily illegal mining, but how to use remote sensing data. And this is one of the applications. So there's still quite a lot of development that still needs to be done, but the critical factor is the availability of data. So there's commercial satellite data that we need to use, and that's quite expensive. At the moment, we have not budgeted, at least as part of our program, to develop this even further, but I think that's the discussions that we'll have internally. And then, yes, Honorable Malinga, you can share the system with Mintech, certainly with the SEPs. That's the collaboration that we are doing. Do we have any guarantee that the mines closed won't be opened again? The simple question is we don't. As you've seen, we close a shaft, a couple of months later they open next to it. But I think the experience that we've taken out of the work that we've done, and certainly shared with Mintech, is that perhaps the design of the way that we're closing these shafts needs to be different. I think Dr. Antoni mentioned that as well. Because we are a research organization, we we're not necessarily an engineering organization, so we do the research, we identify where the mines, which shafts should be closed, the implications of closing those shafts when it comes to groundwater. That's the research part that we are doing. So building internal capacity for closing the shafts would necessarily mean we need to get engineers in the CGS to do the design work. This is not our specialty. I don't think that there is duplication in terms of what we do with Mintech. We certainly share the research, but ours is to say, if the holes are being closed, these are the implications. We don't want to be closing for the sake of closing, even though there's a safety aspect to it, but we might actually be creating a lot of environmental issues by closing randomly. So the research that is being done is to inform on which holes needs to be prioritized and what the implications would be when it comes to groundwater and other environmental aspects. I will leave it to the department to answer the 2018 split between CGS and Mintech. But Doc, maybe you can take the questions on the access. You get 22% visible.
Thank you, Chair members. I will answer the questions that are outstanding. So there was a question about the properties where we had no access. So these were properties where access was explicitly denied, and that goes to your question of whether all mines that were listed as derelict and ownerless were in fact derelict and ownerless. But on other properties, they were not, there were no contact details for us to be able to access, so those were listed as such. Yes, Dr. Mwata from the DMRC will assist me with the question of private versus state land. You asked what is the plan, because we had said that closure is not necessarily rehabilitation. So this was in relation to the state liability. When we look at state liability, we look at liability in totality of rehabilitating a site. At a mining site, you can have holes, you can have mine dumps and slime dams and so on. So that would be total rehabilitation, looking at environmental and physical impacts, but the closure of holes only addresses physical impacts. I think Dr. Koza has explained that we are not doing the same thing. We stopped the activity of closing the mine holdings in 2018, 2019. So the work that we were presenting was from the beginning of the program until then. And then Mintech is presenting an update which will then include our work carrying it forward. I think what is important to highlight is the value of research in mine closure, not just in rehabilitation. We can look at rehabilitation methods and say this is good, this is not, but what is the point if you rehabilitate and then somebody else comes and says, I could have used that dump for something else. So, or you rehabilitated for this purpose, but if you had rehabilitated it differently, I would have used the lead for an alternative purpose. So that's part of the research work that we are doing at CGS to say physical closure good, but rehabilitation must be in full context. I think that is all that was outstanding.
No, thank you. Good afternoon, Chairperson, Honorable Chair, Honorable Members. Honorable Chair, you will recall that there was a judgment which was ordered in 2007 between DBS and Atagua mine. At that particular time, it's in the Northern Cape. The department had issued a prospecting right to a portion of land, in other words, the tailings, which they assumed that it is called derelict and ownerless. And DBS, noting, I suppose, the available ore in that, then contested that decision. and there was a judgment decision. I'm just going to read quickly that, and that had implications on whether, going forward as a department, do we then go into the private land. The judgment, amongst others, says this. It is declared that the applicant is the owner of the tailings dam situated on subdivision 16. And further on, that the decision of the third and fourth respondent to grant a prospective right to the respondent in respect of subdivision 6 is reviewed and set aside. And then very important, order number 4, it says, it is declared that the provisions of the Minerals and Petroleum Resources Development Act do not apply on the tailing dams situated on subdivision 16. Following this order of the court between Atagwa and DBA, you will recall, Chair, that in 2018, the department took the MPRD, review MPRD to the parliamentary process. Part of that was to deal with the challenges which we are facing in as far as the mines which are going into care and maintenance, including such a situation as this one. And unfortunately, we could not go through that precisely because we had noted this lacuna in law. And I imagine it's an issue which the department going forward would need to look at in terms of addressing this gap in law. As a result of this order, by implication, it actually means that the owner of a land X has the right to use that particular land as an, I imagine, for whatever purpose. And therefore the department, in terms of especially order number 4, would not have the jurisdiction to exercise, to ensure that the MPRDA is exercising that particular area. That was the issue. The second one, which I wanted just to respond to, Chair, the question was, why don't we follow up some of these mine right holders who have led us into this derelict and ownerless situation? I think you have responded to that, Chair. But just to add that, yes, we did follow up on some of these mine right holders. You will recall, Chair, that there was a judgment between Blanco and Khosi Bareki in the Northern Cape, wherein Blanco was responsible for mining of asbestos in Hiernan's Plain. And the decision of the court in this instance found Blanco responsible for that exercise. And Blanco had to pay a certain amount of money, which would have been used by, amongst others, Mintech to rehabilitate that particular area. So I thought I should just respond to that. Thanks.
From Mintech, I'll address a few questions and I'll ask Flaco to respond to some. The issue of reopening of holes has been raised a lot. Flaco indicated at the beginning people attempted to reopen our holes directly, and we've since improved on our designs, and we'll talk to that how that happened. So we haven't had an incident where people actually open close to the shaft. They'll move it a step further away. This is an inclined area, so you can, if you are familiar with the area, you can do a lot of things to 50 meters or 100 meters. So that's what they do. But also Flaco indicated that at the beginning we used to have patches of holes all over the place. But recently, by targeting an area, and this is massification and scale of project, actually where you are now displacing, that's actually what we do, the activity. They'll go somewhere. And in those areas where we went en masse, we are seeing the benefits of doing that, like we've done with Makala. So our approach is also have to change as we move forward. Now there was a question raised about whether Mintech should build capacity to actually close the holes themselves. At the beginning, we were given a contract to manage contractors, but actually that was suboptimal. So for the past 3 years, we've built been building internal capacity. We've hired quantity surveyors, and you can see we're negotiating better on prices. We've hired the design engineers, environmental specialists, to really have capacity to understand this space. Now, to move it at the moment is something that Mente, as an entity with the capacity that we've built in research, will be able to do that, to be honest. But what we have managed to do, we are managing contractors much better because we have internal capacity to do that. If you look at the target of 120 holes to be closed, with the same amount, we have sealed 135, okay? Because we have improved on a lot of things, coordination, targeting an area, and so forth. I don't think it's a futile exercise, actually. Monitoring is very key, and that's why we're hoping on this issue. As we close, we need permanent monitoring to happen physically. Technology needs a deterrent in this case, and this is why the conversations that we're having with SAPS, even after we've sealed those holes, our own private security continue to monitor the area. But it becomes too costly to use private security to do that. Technology will help, but the physical presence and visibility of actual policing, in our view, is not our space, but we suspect that it might assist a great deal. Can the period be shortened to close the holes? It's a budget issue, but as we change our approaches, we'll be able to seal more holes. We don't hear much about so that we actually contextualize this, because we have sealed a lot of holes. We have displaced these activities. They will try to go back there. We will continue to monitor. So it's not a massive exercise to go and close 1 or 2 holes as opposed to the 40s that we have to close. And we start to understand the area much better. So we're getting better also with time. There was a question of 26 holes and the 5 and whether the current tender will address that. So I'll ask Flaco to respond to that question. Is there duplication between CGS and Mentec? Actually, the work is complementary. We will be, when the tool is ready, happy also to pilot that in some of the activities. For instance, the database that we're using on DNO, actually it was created by CGS and handed over to us. So there's no duplication in that. In terms of rehabilitation, we are actually rehabilitating asbestos mines, and I need to emphasize, our contract is only on asbestos mines. And the difficulty with asbestos mines, or those dams, is that once rehabilitated, actually, ideally you should not touch them. You should not disturb the soil. Actually, you can't do agricultural activity. You can't be building things because the fibers are still there. All you can hope for with time that there's natural vegetation taking place. That's the best that can happen in there. So with asbestos, it's not about reuse. Don't touch, leave it for years to come. Other commodities, gold, whatever, you can reuse those dams. That's why I'm very specific on asbestos, what is required. The 135 holes, it was since the Mentec received the contract 2019 to 2022. That was phase 1. And what Flago was presenting also looking forward, it will be for the phase 2, new contract 2022 to 2025. Grant conditional, the grant is very specific. Seal the holes and rehabilitate 3 mines, asbestos mines per year. It is, okay? We can only use it for that. Budget, Flaco, I have the budget. Flaco will talk to the budget and the other questions that maybe I might have missed. Flaco?
Thank you, CEO. I'll answer the question that said, is the 26 similar to the outstanding in KRUGERSDORP? And there was a follow-up that said, is the 5 from the same 26? So there is a 26 that is outstanding in the KRUGERSDORP area. And it's just that there's a coincidence in the number 26, but it's different sites. We already were running this program and we had already planned to do 26 shafts in Gauteng. Of those 26, we had 5 from KRUGERSDORP. So that reduces the 26 that we said is outstanding in KRUGERSDORP, which means when we're done with this, we'll be having 21 in KRUGERSDORp, which will then plan, hopefully, maybe for during the year. And then the second question which I've been asked to respond on is the budget. How much do we get per year? And I think there was also a follow-up question with that said, what's the average cost per hauling? So we get funded 122 million per year to do the DNO program, which includes rehabilitation, 3 asbestos mines, and also sealing 40 shafts. The average cost per hauling, it really varies depending on the size of the shaft and the type of the shaft. But if I can just do the maths based on what we have done to date and how much money we spent, we'd say the average is 600,000. But we've had shafts that we closed for as little as 350, and we've had shafts that we've closed for more than 2.5 million. So you can see there's that big gap. And then just maybe to add on to that, the average cost of rehabilitating asbestos mines, you're looking at around 35 million per mine. So you can do the math and see how much remains for the haulings. That's why we do value engineering there, so that we can still fit the 40 million. There was also another question to say, do we engage other departments? There is a multi-stakeholder forum, which maybe the DMRE can provide clarity on, that looks into illegal mining. Once I can provide more feedback on that.
Maybe the last one I see from the chair, who decides on prioritizing the holdings? We do that jointly with the department, but like I've indicated before, there's a lot of intelligence that is required and working with subs. When things do change, I think we are engaging with them to get a better understanding of even reallocation of contractors to target really hotspots that we're aligned to when we plan. We plan for 3 years, and a lot happens in the 3 years. So in our budget consideration, we'll have that in mind, but also it will be a negotiated process with the contractors, because we allocate these batches upfront. So we'll see how we'll engage the department and whether we need to have a conditional, we need to have maybe contingency plan or money to respond to these reactionary type activities which we did not plan for. That's something that will be taken into account going forward.
Okay. Thank you very much, CGS and Intech. We prepare to go for the site visit. DG, tomorrow please help us amongst the questions you must answer. They are not here. I left it deliberately. That is not answered. The issue of the regulatory role of this SATPMR on strategic minerals, particularly on gold. Give us the answer, including I'm just giving you in advance heads up. Somebody once said only. That amongst other things, if we recall, we said you need probably for gold something similar to your Kimberley process. amongst the report that you gave was that you were engaging, if I'm not mistaken, the UN and the WTO, I'm not sure, those big names, to make sure that there's a commodity. The gold, because like other members were raising here, you can arrest even if they are in millions, these Zamazamas. Biggest problem is that it's the market. It's how does it get out of the country, and whether we are not don't have people who are informal mining gold but selling gold that is found in an illicit manner. Please help us or even on that. Like members, I think we share. The slow pace on this matter, it's the only major concern. Because all these things, we don't get progress, how far we have gone, where we are stuck, and so forth. Lastly, in that presentation, yes, we may need the violent side, but also in terms of the challenges. Even where there is none, there could be in future the possibility. I made an example, I said to one of my colleagues that if we were to succeed to close the market in gold, who told us that your illegal activities on Chrome may not turn tomorrow and be part of the Zamazamas or any other commodity for that matter? Should we again be caught unaware if it moves? Because mostly our biggest challenge and where the violent side is at this stage is on gold. But it doesn't mean we can't have a commodity change in that respect. Having said so, honorable members, I'm told it's ready. Once you are carrying your breakfast, I'm told lunch is ready. Let's have lunch quickly. It's now 5 to 2:30. We must all be queuing on the cars to go.